Hello there. Welcome to Just the Discs. We talk about Blu-rays here. And today we are going to be talking about some Warner Archive Blu-rays. This is a bunch of Warner Archive releases from the month of December 2023. And there's a lot to talk about, so let's get into it. I'll start with what I think is maybe my most anticipated and most exciting of these releases, and that's Tarzan the Ape Man from 1932. The first of the Johnny Weissmuller Tarzan films to hit Blu-ray, as far as I know. Previous to this, Warner Archive had put out Tarzan's Greatest Adventure from 1959 with Gordon Scott as Tarzan, and then two of the Jock Mahoney Tarzans, Tarzan Goes to India from 1962 and Tarzan's Three Challenges from 1963. I'm a fan of all three of those, especially Tarzan's Greatest Adventure. But this is really exciting because it's, the Weissmuller and Maureen O'Sullivan films are pretty great. And so it's cool to finally get this. We're probably not going to get a box set. That's not been the way Warner Archive goes about this. They tend to put out single releases. So here's hoping we see more of these. I'm going to read a little something from one of my favorite books, Danny Perry's Guide for the Film Fanatic. He has an entry about Tarzan the Ape Man, which reads, first talkie Tarzan film which borrows elements from Edgar Rice Burroughs' first Tarzan novel, Tarzan of the Apes, and deletes many more, including all references to Tarzan's origins, has lots of action and adventure, but is foremost a very erotic love story set in the primitive jungles of Africa. We meet Jane, Maureen O'Sullivan, long before Tarzan makes his first appearance. She has come to Africa to join her father, C. Aubrey Smith, and a younger man, Neil Hamilton, on an expedition. And I think he's Commissioner Gordon from Batman. Maybe I'm thinking of somebody else. No, he's like the police chief in the Batman TV series. On an expedition in search of an elephant burial ground. Smith doesn't think that she should go along, but she is obstinate. Significantly, she is a young woman who seems to be searching for excitement, and early on, we see her in a revealing slip, her first lover. Hamilton is available, but she is seeking someone with less formality, with wild, uninhibited instincts. In the jungle, she is literally swept off her feet by the ape man, who takes her back to his tree lair. She is frightened by him, but her heart beats quickly, and her hand rests on his thigh as he eyes her lustily and puts his large hands all over her. She senses that underneath the initial roughness, he is tender, and she knows that despite the childish frolicking, he is a man. She is glad that she can act without inhibitions. She rips off parts of her skirt to use as bandages on his forehead. She swims with him and keeps climbing into his muscular arms. She runs around barefoot. She has never been more girlish. But following their long, increasingly risque swim and playing, they both indicate that it's time that they grew up. Anyway, he goes into some more stuff about that side of the story, which I find intriguing. But just in terms of what the back says, it's like Tarzan, Jane, Jane, Tarzan. Tarzan, Jane, Tarzan, Jane. These are the real words spoken by Johnny Weissmuller making his screen debut as Tarzan the Ape Man to Maureen O'Sullivan as the Lady Jane. And when Cheetah made 3, the Treetop Trio won over the whole country. The first of the MGM Tarzan adventures, Tarzan the Ape Man, remains the greatest jungle thriller of all time. Heading the cast, Olympic swimming champion Weissmuller bursts with bravery as the loincloth-sporting, vine-swinging, but gentle-hearted king of the wilderness, and lovely O'Sullivan exudes charming grace as the young English socialite who, though at first fearful, eventually forsakes civilization in order to remain in the wild with her primitive and passionate lover. Together, the young couple faces a world of barbaric danger. While searching for the elephant burial ground, Tarzan is forced to fight a gorilla to the death, and the famous stampede of wild elephants charging in response to their friend's call is one of those spectacular sequences ever filmed. It is pretty great. Through it all, Tarzan triumphs. The film was so successful in its initial release that it was followed by 5 sequels made over the ensuing decade at Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. More than 90 years after its initial debut, Weissmuller and O'Sullivan still light up the screen with adventure and romance in this all-time classic. So that's that's definitely summing it up well. I guess, this is the most popular of the most popular series of Tarzan films, starting with this one, starring Weissmuller and O'Sullivan, of course. And Weissmuller is the son of ethnic German immigrants from Hungarian parts of Austria and Hungary. He was already known as a 5-time Olympic gold medalist in swimming. He became the most famous, long-lasting screen Tarzan, starring as the ape man in a total of 12 films throughout 1948, the first 6 produced by MGM, and the final 6 from RKO. The beauteous and scantily clad O'Sullivan was a major factor in the early popularity of the series. The role of Jane in the films was reduced after O'Sullivan departed in 1942, following the 6th film in the series and the last for MGM, Tarzan's New York Adventure, which I do like and which I hope gets a Blu-ray. 2 Janeless films followed before Brenda Joyce took over for the last 4 Weissmuller Tarzan films. I don't think I've seen those last 4, honestly. I've seen, some of the Gordon Scotts and the Giacomo Mahonies, but I don't know if I've seen all the Weissmuller films. I think I've seen all the Weissmuller O'Sullivan films. This film's directed by W.S. Van Dyke, who had done the very successful Trader Horn, sort of an adventure travelogue film previous to this, and would go on to do many more interesting things, including the Thin Man films. This is a nice Blu-ray in that it includes Tarzan silver screen King of the Jungle from 2004 that was made for the big DVD set that Warner Brothers put out, Warner Home Entertainment. It's about an 80-minute documentary that touches on the history of the character, starting with a little history on Edgar Rice Burroughs, the author who created him, and sort of how he got to finding the character, and then goes through some of the silent films, followed by the serials, and then on up through the other Weissmuller films. As with the movies, the silents actually made a lot of money, which led to the serials, and then Weissmuller and O'Sullivan. Apparently, Clark Gable and Douglas Fairbanks were considered for Tarzan. In this documentary, interviews that are included are film historian Rudy Belmer, Edgar Rice Burroughs historian Scott Tracy Griffin, Johnny Weissmuller biographer Jeff St. Andrews, Johnny Weissmuller Jr., son of Johnny Weissmuller, Olympic gold medalist John Neighbor, Maureen O'Sullivan herself, Robert Osborne, and others. And it's a very educational film about the series and the character, and I enjoyed it. And it goes into all kinds of great detail about the films, touching on production issues, censorship issues, how they created the Tarzan yell, and how Weissmuller mastered it. It's really nice, and the transfer looks good, not surprisingly, from a Warner archive release. This also includes classic cartoons I Wish I Had Wings and Moonlight for Two, as well as the original trailer. So that's Tarzan the Ape Man from 1932. Like I said, I hope we're going to see more Tarzan films on Blu-ray. Okay, next up we have Gentleman Jim. Now this one is from Raoul Walsh, and it is from 1942, and it is, for me, a very enjoyable underdog boxing movie. And it stars Errol Flynn, Jack Carson, Alan Hale, William Frawley shows up. Ward Bond has a great role in this. It's just one of those stories of a guy from the wrong side of the tracks, played by Errol Flynn. He is Gentleman Jim, who desires to be accepted and part of upper society, but also resents upper society at the same time. So it's a weird, interesting thing where Alan Hale Sr. plays his father. Alan Hale often played with him as one of his contemporaries in lots of his films, but I think it's interesting he plays his father here. And from the lowly perch as a bank teller with his pal Jack Carson, the Gentleman Jim character seizes an opportunity to visit the elite Olympic Club and weasels his way into an opportunity to box there. The back of this says, looking lithe and lean and more handsome than should be allowed by law, Errol Flynn was never better suited for a role than the legendary boxer James J. Gentleman Jim Corbett. Indeed, this rousing screen biography captures the essence of two colorful personalities, Flynn and Corbett, at the height of their careers. Set primarily against the backdrop of 1880s San Francisco, the film follows Corbett's rise from bank clerk to world champion. With his lightning-quick punches and dance-like footwork, the glib, cocky Irishman revolutionized the heretofore illegal prize-fighting game, elevating it from bare-knuckle brawling to the sport of skill it is today. An excellent supporting cast of Warner Brothers favorites features the lovely Alexis Smith, the always hearty Alan Hale, and the irresistible bluster of Ward Bond, whose forgettable portrayal of John, the great John L. Sullivan, will touch your heart. For Flynn at his best, and a rousing, sometimes wistful look back at professional boxing's early days, Gentleman Jim ranks as one of the finest of many biographical classics to come out of the golden age of Warner Brothers. Yeah, I mean, it's very solid. Boxing movies are a genre. I mean, I'm just a big sports fan, big sports movie fan. I'm actually not a sports fan, really. But sports movies, boxing movies, I find really compelling, really cinematic. Obviously, some of the great films about boxing, like Raging Bull, or The Setup, or things like that, really stand out. Rocky, obviously. But yeah, this is a really nice set that includes Warner Brothers cartoons, The Dover Boys at Pimento University, Phony Fables, Hobby Horse Laughs, and then there's audio only of Lady Esther's Screen Guild Playhouse radio broadcast with Errol Flynn and Alexis Smith. So that's nice to have that included. But yeah, just a good boxing movie where you keep kind of waiting for him to lose and to see what will happen when he does. And I'm not going to reveal whether or not that does happen or how it's handled when it does happen. But it is an intriguing watch from that point of view, as it's like he doesn't lose early on. And it seems like Alexis Smith is this sort of upper crust girl that both is attracted to and repelled by him. And she actually begins to root against him because she finds him so cocky. And he is. So that is a little tough to take at times, ultimately. But anyway, it's a very enjoyable film from a very solid director in Raoul Walsh, who would do other things like White Heat, High Sierra, The Roaring Twenties, which just got announced for Criterion Blu-ray for next year, Strawberry Blonde, which has come out on Blu-ray from Warner Archive, and They Drive by Night, Pursued with Robert Mitchum. That's a great Western. And then he did They Died with Their Boots On with Errol Flynn. Anyway, so that is Gentleman Jim. And next we have The Great Zig Feld. Now this one is something of an epic in a way because it is 3 hours long and it even has like an overture, a 5-minute overture at the front. And William Powell stars as Florenz Flo Ziegfeld, and this is sort of his origin story. This 1936 Best Picture Oscar winner is every bit as extravagant as its subject. Theatrical impresario Florence Ziegfeld Jr. Said Newsweek, it carries on his tradition of superlatives, the most expensive actors, the best dancers, the most beautiful girls. William Powell gives one of the most acclaimed performances as the legendary Ziegfeld. Joining him are other stars from MGM Constellation, Myrna Loy, and I think this is preceding the Thin Man movies, so they're together before those, because this is from 1936. Yeah. Let's see here. Myrna Loy, Louise Rayner, The Wizard of Oz's Frank Morgan, and Ray Bolger, and in rare screen appearance, the legendary Ziegfeld star Fanny Brice, whose life story would later become the stage and movie hit Funny Girl. Of course, it wouldn't be Ziegfeld without a parade of tunes, more than 20 songs, showgirls, more than 300, and dazzling set pieces. Most spectacular of all is the massive wedding cake sequence set to Irving Berlin's A Pretty Girl is Like a Melody. No applause was added to the soundtrack of this scene. Live audiences provided plenty and still do. So, yeah, some really nice musical numbers and just an epic story of kind of rags to riches. We open with Flo Ziegfeld, as like a carnival barker selling a strongman show, and trying to entice Frank Morgan's character to drum up a romance with his, he's got some sort of female star that he's got a show with. And Frank Morgan's like, yeah, of course he wants to join forces because it benefits him. His shows are almost empty, mine are always full, and they sort of hit it off from there. And, eventually he takes off. But what I meant to say, and I forgot on Gentleman Jim, is I'd like to sort of offer pairings for each of these films, outside of the Tarzan film, which you could pair with any number of Tarzan movies. But for Gentleman Jim, I was thinking Cinderella Man would be a good one, the Ron Howard movie from 2005, which I only recently saw this year for the first time, and I very much enjoyed Russell Crowe's performance, and it's a great underdog boxing story, a little more dramatic, a little sadder than Gentleman Jim, which is ultimately a pretty buoyant film, but I still think a good pairing. So anyway, Ziegfeld I'll give a pairing for at the end, but this Blu-ray has some things on it here. We have Ziegfeld on Film, which is a 13-minute featurette talking about the real Ziegfeld and how the movie compares to his real life. And they interview Patricia Ziegfeld Stevenson, the daughter of Flo Ziegfeld and Billy Burke, and Louise Rayner, who is Anna Held from The Great Zig Feld, Richard Ziegfeld, who's the author of The Ziegfeld Touch, and others. But it's a nice 13-minute encapsulation of Ziegfeld as a man and character. Then there's a Ziegfeld premiere newsreel, which is 4 minutes of the premiere of the film back in 1936, which is fun. Then there is a vintage cartoon, Toy Town Hall, and audio only Leo is on the Air radio promotional program, as well as the original theatrical trailer. So some nice extra features for The Great Ziegfeld. This film runs just over 3 hours long. So very epic, and William Powell, one of my favorites, and this is one of his big, attention-getting performances. So that's The Great Ziegfeld. We're going to jump ahead here for a minute to 1995, I believe, with a Midwinters Tale, also known as In the Bleak Midwinter. And this is Kenneth Branagh directing, and it is a fascinating comedy about a group of out-of-work actors trying to put on a Christmas production of Hamlet. And I'd never seen it before. I wasn't even really aware of it. To be or not to be, to act or not to act, they are the same question to Joe, a struggling, jobless actor whose every sinew and synapse cries out to perform, and to soften the blow of not landing a part in a mega-budget sci-fi movie. So in the stalwart, aka desperate tradition of actors everywhere, Joe vows to put on a show, a special, even more desperate, version of the greatest play in the English tongue, that being Hamlet. Writer-director Kenneth Branagh serves up a Hamlet on rye with this salute to dyed-in-the-wool and often woolly-brained thespians. Michael Maloney plays Joe, maxing out his credit cards and wits to realize a dream. Does he succeed? ? With Richard Briers, Joan Collins, I think she's his agent or somebody that's helping him. Nicholas Farrell, absolutely fabulous alumna Jennifer Saunders, and Julia Sawala, and more joining Maloney. One thing is certain, the show must go on. So I find this one pretty fascinating because it, like I said, it comes out in 1995, and it, is what would feel to me like an early film from Kenneth Branagh. But then I'm like, 95, I know he had done some things already at that point, so it can't be his first film. And of course it's not, because he really broke onto the scene in 1989 when he directed himself and a great cast in Henry V. And he followed that with one of my favorites of his, which is Dead Again from 1991, the thriller, great thriller. And then there was Peter's Friends in 92 and Much Ado About Nothing in 93 and Mary Shelley's Frankenstein in 94. And then A Midwinter's Tale in 95, followed interestingly by his performance or his film of Hamlet, which is one that he got a lot of praise for when it did come out in 96. So I find that fascinating that he followed this tale of a bunch of folks trying to make Hamlet with Hamlet. But like it's a great group of folks. Out of work actor Joe volunteers to try and save his sister's local church for the community by putting on a Christmas production of Hamlet, somewhat against the advice of his agent Margareta. As the cast assembles are still available even at Christmas and are prepared to do it on a profit-sharing basis. That is, they may not get paid anything. He cannot expect and does not get the cream of the cream. But although they all bring their own problems and foibles along, something bigger starts to emerge in the perhaps aptly named Village of Hope. So it's fun. It reminds me of, and one of the pairings I would offer for this is Waiting for Guffman, which doesn't come out until a year later. It's not as funny as Waiting for Guffman. It's a little drier, but definitely has some very funny moments of these actors being directed and interpreting direction in very interesting ways. And it's a lively comedy, and I kind of wish Branagh did more comedies, actually, after seeing this. So it's definitely something I recommend. It has only the original trailer as a feature. It is a black and white, I think it's a black and white movie. I'm trying to remember if I'm misremembering that. But I think that gives it this kind of scrappy, low-budget feeling. But it's very R-rated, and it's interesting. It's definitely an interesting entry in the Kenneth Branagh canon, for sure. Okay, so pairings, like I said, I would say Waiting for Guffman, maybe With Nail and I. That was something else I thought of while watching it, you know. That's a movie that precedes this one and is also a little better, or definitely a lot better, but still worthwhile. So that's A Midwinters Tale. Next we have Madame Bovary. This is one of many adaptations of Madame Bovary. This is the 1949 version, directed by Vincent Minnelli, who, of course, the renowned director of all kinds of classics like American in Paris, Meet Me in St. Louis, Gigi, The Bad and the Beautiful, The Bandwagon. That's a big Scorsese favorite. I love Some Came Running. I think that's maybe one of his best, with Sinatra and Shirley MacLaine and Dean Martin in one of his best roles. He did The Clock, which is one of my favorites. Warner Archive put that out on Blu-ray. 2 Weeks in Another Town. Anyway, he did a ton of great stuff. And this story has an interesting framing device, or at least this version of the story, because it opens with the book's author, Flaubert, played by James Mason, on trial for the accused moral corruption of his book, and the Emma Bovary character and the choices and actions she undertakes in the book, which is like adultery and or, abandoning a child. And, so James Mason's character, the author, is answering for the book. He goes on the stand and explains / narrates the story of Emma Bovary and why she is not immoral, but rather just a complex, human being who makes mistakes. And so I think that's intriguing. And of course, the great Madame Bovary character is played by the great Jennifer Jones, who is really wonderful in this. And she meets a small-town doctor, Charles Bovary, played by Van Heflin, who I'm a big fan of. And their marriage starts in something of a storybook way, but begins to fall apart when at one point they move to this small village, and she seems very excited about it, but then finds the people there kind of tiresome, and they are. But at one point they're visited by like a baron or something like that, and she becomes intrigued with the idea. He throws out an invite to his place, his big castle somewhere, and at some point she's like, well, we should go, and they do go, and it goes very badly. Like, she has a great time, he doesn't know what to do with himself, he gets drunk and embarrasses her, and the marriage is starting to disassemble. She meets Louis Jourdan, and that becomes a thing. But it's a story that is definitely sad, and I can see why folks would have been perhaps thrown by it when it was written. But the performance and just kind of seeing where it goes, ultimately, I think allows for us to understand the character in a deeper way. Supporting cast includes Gene Lockhart, Harry Morgan, George Zucco. I'm trying to think. There's a bunch of other folks in here that I recognized, but yeah, it's a great performance from Jennifer Jones and another great entry in the Vincent Minnelli canon. This Blu-ray includes the MGM short Some of the Best from 1949 and the MGM cartoon Love That Pup. So a couple to make it a night at the movies kind of scenario with Madame Bovary from 1949. Let's see here. For pairings, I would offer up Dragonwyck. This is one that had come out some time ago from... This came out from Twilight Time, I think, and it's a really interesting, somewhat similar story to this in that it has a woman. I want to say is it Jean Tierney I'm thinking of? Let me look this up. It's from 1946. It is Jean Tierney. From Miranda Wells moving to New York to live in Dragonwyck Manor with her rich cousin. Nicholas seemed like a dream. However, the situation gradually becomes nightmarish. She observes Nicholas' troubled relationship with his tenant farmers, as well as with his daughter. He's played by Vincent Price. To whom Miranda serves as a governess. Her relationship with Nicholas intensifies after his wife dies, but his mental imbalance threatens any hope of happiness. So there's something about this idea of fairy tale stories. There's something that Bovary, the story of Bovary makes me think of a warped Cinderella kind of idea, and how people respond to that story, but they didn't respond to this one because she's much more real in that sense. But anyway, I think Dragonwyck would make a nice pairing with Madame Bovary. Okay, so next up we have Anna Christie. This is a Greta Garbo film from 1930. It is directed by Clarence Brown. And this is praised as one of her better performances. When it was learned that Greta Garbo was cast as a disillusioned prostitute in Anna Christie, even her most devoted admirers were skeptical. Not only was it an unglamorous role for the 24-year-old actress, but it was also to be her first talking picture. Garbo's answer was to play it superbly, with her first and now famous spoken line, "Give me a whiskey, ginger ale on the side, and don't be stingy, baby." That is a pretty great opening line. Garbo conquered the world of sound films based on Eugene O'Neill's Pulitzer Prize-winning play. And Garbo gives a fantastic, fascinating performance as an embittered prostitute who returns home to her father, a barge captain. She finds sympathy in the gruff but kindly Marie Dressler. But when a sailor, Charles Bickford, falls in love with Anna, she is forced to reveal her tarnished past to both him and her father, leading to a riveting climax. Among the special features on the disc is the German language version of the scenario, starring Garbo with a different cast and director. So that's like the Spanish version of Dracula in some sense. A whole nother version of the movie is included here. Uniquely different take on the source material, one which Garbo allegedly preferred to the more widely known English language version. So that's a cool thing to have on this one. This also includes the... it's directed by Jacques Feyder, somebody else. Garbo early career retrospective episode of MGM Parade TV series, which is hosted by Walter Pidgeon, and it's about 30 minutes, and it's sponsored by Maxwell House Coffee, and there's even like a built-in ad with Rex Marshall or somebody talking about the coffee, but so they go through her whole career. And it's a nice highlight reel of that. And I like Walter Pidgeon, so he's a good host. Also included is the 2/7/1938 Lux Radio Theater broadcast of Anna Christie with Joan Crawford and the classic 1930 Looney Tunes cartoon, The Booze Hangs High. So very cool. But yeah, this one, it's, this idea of this father whose daughter has been estranged for all this time. He hasn't seen her, and she comes back to him, and he expects that she's lived, to his mind, a, respectable life. And obviously we find out that's not the case. And the dramatic way that she deals with that is pretty compelling, I have to say. And she's very compelling. And I hadn't seen a lot of her work, so I wasn't prepared for how her voice sounds. It's like a lower register, sounding voice. And there's something interesting about that coming from her. I don't know. I really was drawn to that somehow. But so that's an interesting film that I had not seen prior to this. In terms of pairings, I was going to throw out things like Stella Dallas from 1937 with the great Barbara Stanwyck, kind of wanting to live up, but feeling like she shames her daughter with her lower class position in society. A real tearjerker. And also Nights of Cabiria, which is another story of a prostitute, kind of a sad story, if you will, but great Fellini film, Giada Messina starring in the role. And I feel like that's another part of it too, is just a very strong female performance from the leads. And I feel like Nights of Cabiria lines up with this one in that way. So that is Anna Christie from 1930. And last but not least, we have a more modern movie. We have Saving Grace from 2000, directed by Nigel Cole. And this one is a cute, kind of indie feeling. It's from, I want to say it's from Fine Line Features. Maybe that was that this, or was that Midwinters Tale? I can't remember. That sort of art house division of New Line that has since gone away, but put out some interesting films. This is sort of in the wake of films like, The Full Monty and Waking Ned Divine, where they're like European-based cute indies. Some of them based in smaller villages. There was just a little run of these in the late 90s and on into the 2000s. But it's an intriguing, cute little movie. Grace Trevethan, Brenda Blethyn, has just discovered that she's broke. Her husband passed away, leaving her with nothing but a mound of debt and a ton of worries. Enter Grace's bubbling pothead gardener, Craig Ferguson, obviously before he had his own show, with an ingenious plan. Together, they turn Grace's greenhouse into a marijuana factory. The profits soar through the roof, but drawing too much attention from the eccentric locals, they now have an ambitious constable hot on their trail. Two-time Academy Award nominee, Secrets and Lies and Little Voice, Brenda Blethyn gives an outstanding performance opposite the uniquely talented Craig Ferguson in a potent comedy that will just make you say yes to Saving Grace. Very cute movie that really does sum up the plot pretty well. It is kind of sad at the opening to see Brenda Blethyn going to see the banker to realize that their 300-year-old house that she had assumed long been paid off has in fact been borrowed against by her now deceased husband for years to try and finance his various business ventures, none of which succeeded. And that the mortgage is £2,000 a month in 2000. So imagine what that would be like now. That's a lot more money. That's a lot in 2000, 23 years ago. And then she finds out he even owes a lot more, like £300,000 for this other thing. So a lot of pressure to make some money, and the comedy ensues. This is a rare Warner Archive disc that I think had a nice DVD, so we have 2 commentary tracks included here. A writer's commentary with Craig Ferguson and Mark Crowdy. They were the co-writers on the film, with director Nigel Cole, which is a very entertaining track. And then an actor's commentary with Brenda Blethyn, Craig Ferguson, and director Nigel Cole. Equally entertaining and funny. Craig Ferguson, obviously, there's a reason he had his own show. The guy's very humorous and always a delight to listen to. He doesn't have he does have some insights, but a lot of his comments are just funny comments, ultimately. So for this one, it becomes sort of a not quite a Save the Rec Center movie, but one of the ultimate Save the Rec Center movies is Breakin' 2. I think Breakin' 2 would be an interesting pairing with this, or Local Hero, Bill Forsythe's film about a business acquisition man coming to a small Scottish town, I believe, to try to talk them into selling so that they can build a giant oil refinery off the coast or something. I don't know. But it's the sense of that charm that the small town has that I think makes it feel like a good pairing with this, because this is a very charming small community. The other one I came across and I haven't seen, there's a docu-series called High Profits that paints a comprehensive picture of the cannabis industry's entrepreneurial spirit, which is another thing this definitely has, entrepreneurial spirit. It's a journey following Brian Rogers and Caitlin McGuire, ambitious business partners dreaming of creating a cannabis empire. And it's a long docuseries, but I'm very curious to check it out after seeing this movie. Just feels like not exactly a real world version of this, but at least touches on that sort of story. So anyway, that is Saving Grace from 2000, and that will close out the Warner Archive releases from December for this episode. So thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.